Welcome everybody. That's actually the only Twitter tweet that I've ever done in my life, so I was pretty proud of that. That was from an Arkansas farmer. Who had a classic sense of humour. His other poster he had on his wall was a big sign, vegetarian, written in a dictionary type fashion. Ancient word for bad hunter. So, welcome everybody. Yes, my talk is on rice. We've had our meat, we've had our eggs, we've had our beer. So sorry, rice is it. For those of you who were at Toby Becker's talk this morning, talking about the branding of luxury goods and the marketing of luxury goods, he said, put your enterprise in where he's got wine. And I'm thinking, put rice there, there's really nothing more bland than rice. But that story of provenance, that story of quality, and as Sarah said, the story of telling your story is just as important and relevant for the rice industry as it is for any of our industries. I want to say welcome particularly to the new scholars. I hope your journey for the next 2 years is as fantastic as mine has been for the last 2 years. And I haven't caught up with many of you yet, but I hope to tonight possibly. My topic was actually on water, more than anything. I wanted to focus on water, where water sits in the social consciousness of countries around the world. Obviously the focus is on rice, within the rice industry. Some may say from a water point of view, what I was looking at was actually the very survival of the rice industry as opposed to just the future of the rice industry. And I think it's a really pertinent point. Before I kick off, I want to thank a few people. Nuffield Australia, what an organisation. If somebody could have told me 2 years ago that this is what I was going to do for the next 2 years, I would have said, you're dreaming. AgriFutures Australia, Nuffield can't do this on their own, obviously. So the foresight and the funding available from AgriFutures Australia, often I think it's hard to see where the benefit comes from their input, but it is most definitely an ongoing and very important part of agriculture in Australia. I also want to thank Sunrise. Now I'm a rice farmer down in Murrumbidgee irrigation area of southern New South Wales. I'm also in an agro extension role with Sunrise. Sunrise, which I got actually after my Nuffield Scholarship, so it's been a very busy 2 years. Sunrise have been very generous with their time and their resources. They are a great example of what an Australian commodity company can achieve, so thank you for them. Obviously I also want to thank my family. My wife, if she had found out what I was going to do for the next 2 years ago, she would have also said, you're dreaming. So she has been great support through all of this. I certainly couldn't have done it without her, without my wider family for stepping in whenever needed, and my 4 girls, Emma, Molly, Sally and Rebecca, for their unwavering belief in what I was doing. So let's this will come up funny, but let's just take a step back. Why rice? So if we look at the global perspective of rice, rice is the 3rd largest cereal grown in the world behind wheat and corn. It's the one most consumed by humans. Over 4 billion people consume 7 million tonnes of rice every year. 700 million tonnes, sorry, of rice every year. As global population is increasing, predicted to reach 9.7 billion within the next 30 years, agricultural researchers are saying that we're going to have to increase our agricultural production by 50%. Now, if that's the case, and we want to preserve our natural ecosystems as they are, and as is the priority for many governments around the world now, we really have to do this on the existing existing agricultural footprint that we have. 40% of our food in the world comes from 20% of our land mass under irrigation. And with dry land yields stagnating over the past 2 decades globally, that it's the development intensification of a lot of these irrigation resources is what's going to drive future food production. According to the International Rice Research Institute, there's a little scientist area up there located in the Philippines, a magnificent collaborative, you know what I mean, put together research facility That rice, that 96% of rice is irrigated, is under irrigated, using 40% of the world's irrigation resources. Increasing yields and particularly increasing water use efficiency, or the amount we can get out of each meg of water, is absolutely critical and they believe the key to global food security. And interesting climate resilience, that's another story. So let's come back to Australia. This is me pretending that I know what I'm doing in my rice field. Fantastic shot of the Cockapara National Park in behind me there. Australia is in a relatively unique position in that its water is a commodity as opposed to a resource, as in most parts of the world. In that respect, that water can be traded both on an annual and a permanent basis between the whole Murrumbidgee and Murray Valley river systems. So rice really has to position itself for those resources. Has to be worth a lot per tonne, and we have to get the yield out of it, and we have to decrease the water use to compete for resources of other crops such as cotton, such as corn, horticultural crops, nut crops, all up and down the Murrumbidgee and Murray River systems now. So that was the focus of my report. How can we, what's I guess the rest of the world doing in that space, where they're sitting, how we can and look at not just increasing our water use efficiency in terms of tonnes per meg, but how we can increase our value of that tonne, where that story of provenance and marketability will hopefully come out. So very briefly, this is where I travelled. The blue circles there is my GFP, nothing to do with the rice, so I just wanted to put it in the show because it was a really fantastic trip. So, but the red circles, I travelled through Uruguay, Brazil in the south there, mid-south of the United States and to the west coast, into Erie in the centre there, down near the equator, where I had a fantastic look at the equatorial rice systems of Southeast Asia, South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa, up into the northwest area of India, in the Punjab region, and then in the south and the north areas of China. The black line north and south of the equator there is the 34-degree latitude line, so roughly the centre of the Australian rice industry at 34 degrees, and I went roughly around those spots. One to look at yields. The likes of Uruguay was the fastest growing yielding country in the world over the past 10 years, stagnated out now. Where water was an issue, such as United States, certainly China, and most definitely India, and essentially what they were looking to do and where they were heading and how we sit in that space, and indeed where the opportunities are for our industry. So let's just take a very quick snapshot of where Australia sits. According to Food and Agricultural Organisation stats, we're the best yielding country in the world. That's quite a conservative yield estimate, and but we're a tonne above our nearest neighbour, which was interestingly Egypt, or our nearest yielding competitor. 2 tonne above Uruguay and 2.5 tonne above our main competitor in the medium grain rice story, United States. Water is a lot harder to measure. Now, we are one of the only countries in the world, again, that measures water volumetrically on farm. Our irrigators, if there's any irrigators in the room here, pat yourselves on the back, because we know where our water goes. We are very, very efficient with our water at the farm level. As I say, very hard to actually put figures together properly from an industry level because of that fact. However, just based on research that I found, added the rainfall that falls through a rice season, and that's the approximate figures that come out. Australia's already doing it very well. The industry average at 0.84. There's individual growers that are doing 1.2, 1.3. The industry aim over the next decade is 1.5. My take on it is you actually can't wait for that decade. We've got to get an industry average of 1.2 soon and have our key growers getting 1.5. And I fully believe that it can be done, and we require that step change in a big hurry. Just very quickly, what's happening, a few spots around the world. The picture down below is a shot from Uruguay. Those dark lines, if you can see them, the squiggle lines are the banks that hold water back. Rice is obviously a ponded crop. Water is ponded on field for the majority of the crop. It's a very steep slope that for rice production. It's about 1%. Most of Australia is about 0.01. Is that right? 0.1% rather than 1%, or less. So for them to water, they actually have to cascade over each bank. So they fill up first bay, that cascades in the second bay, cascades in the third bay. To do that, they are very inefficient at rainfall capture because every single bay is full all the time. And they get 500 mil of rain during the rice season. So what they've done, they've got this flexible pipe they've put down through each bay. It's engineered so that the little gates there, each bay fills up together. And they only have to half fill the bay, still covered, but half fill the bay, so that if they get 100 mil of rain, they can actually capture the majority of that. Throughout the United States, Uruguay and Brazil, that is working quite well. Very low adoption. I'll get to that in a minute. More adoption in Uruguay and Brazil. Subsidy and the cost of water is one thing. Particularly in the United States, the cost of water, well, water doesn't cost anything. Most times it's subsidised to be pumped out of the ground as well, not including California. California is extremely difficult, very variable. There's dozens and dozens of different valleys within the California state, all have their own water sort of system, so I could be here all day talking about California. Most of 70% of America's rice comes from Arkansas or comes from the Mid-South area, the Arkansas, Mississippi area. That's where I spent the majority of my time. This is in India, so I want to focus on that top picture there, just with a few stats out of interest more than anything. Most of the world's rice is planted like this. So it's transplanted, it's grown in a nursery, it gets to sort of 3 to 5 leaf stage, bundled up, planted out like that. The farmer pays $120 a hectare for teams to come in and plant. 10 good men can do 1 hectare in a day. So just a figure for you, 41 million hectares is planted like that in India alone. So when I was told that, I walked away, and yeah, okay, 41 million, and I walked, 41 million! That's yes, as Chris was saying with his stats, it was beyond our belief. They are doing a lot of good work in India. India's in big trouble, particularly in the northwest region. It's all groundwater. It's the aquifer is depleting at 1 metre a year. Within the US, it's depleting around 0.5 metre a year in the Mississippi Delta area where they're pumping water. The Arkansas, Mississippi Delta region, India and northeast China are all aquifer pumping. Australia, it's all gravity fed out of the snowy schemes of the headwaters of the Murray and Murrumbidgee River. California is mostly surface fed, and Uruguay, it's all sort of annually surface fed. Uruguay particularly has, and Brazil, unlimited water resources. Their water resources are unbelievable and mostly untapped, above ground and below ground. However, much of the West, where I spent a lot of my time, which grows a big percentage of their rice, it's actually on farm storage dams that are filled annually, and they govern and are in control of their water very, very strictly. So they, even though they've probably got the most abundant water of everybody, are actually the best at managing it from all the other countries except Australia, really. The bottom picture is where they're looking to head. There's all sorts of research happening from drip feeding through to dry seeding rice, such as this one. Alternate wet dry, so they just continue to flush rice rather than pond and fill up. Lots of varying degrees of success, very poor adoption. Weed control is a big issue, irrigation layouts are a big issue, and having water on demand is a big issue, and that will continue to be a big issue for generations to come, really. Australia already practices all these, and they do it very well. We have layouts that are lasered, all lasered. We have ability for high flow water on demand. We are already there. So I wasn't really expecting to find any huge gems. Extremely interested in everything that was going on, but I wasn't really expected to find a huge gem. But I did. in India, and this is why. 20 million tonne of rice straw went up in 2 days in the northwest area of India. It blacked out Delhi. The prevailing winds, Delhi's about 300 kilometres away, the prevailing winds settled over Delhi, and Delhi was blacked out for about a week. All the politicians live in Delhi, and a big percentage of India's population live in Delhi, and it was banned next year. So it was banned in Pakistan at the same time. It's been banned in China for the last 12 years. It's been banned in Brazil and Uruguay for the last 15. The United States is allowed to burn, but extremely strictly regulated. So if Australia can learn something, none of this really was for scientific reasons, it was all for social reasons. We're on tender hooks with our stubble burning, and that's not just rice. And I think that we as an industry, certainly the rice industry, have to be proactive with that, rather whinge about the regulatory big stick that will come, that we really have to sit there and think, what can we do with this resource that currently is being wasted? As with India, Australia looks to sow a winter crop directly after planting rice, as with the northwest area of India. India is a big country. So burning that stubble, we get, between 10 and 15 tonne to the hectare of very hard to manage stubble. Burning it is really the only way to get that winter crop in and utilise a profile of moisture that's often left over from the rice. So the Indians, being a very resourceful bunch, as they are, invented this machine, which I was really taken with. It's called a happy seeder, which is a very Indian way to talk about a machine. But that's at the front. There's a mulching tine, a threshing, a mulching tine, a flail is what I was thinking of. It's actually in a Y shape, and it goes over the top of the tine as it's going, so against the direction of travel. It basically clears a path about 5 centimetres wide, and directly in front of that tine, and the tine can actually sow a seed into that. They're handling 10-tonne rice stubbles and doing it easy. It's only a 2.5 metre machine because all their tractors are only 50 horsepower, but I thought there's huge potential in that. We had a look at a trial that this machine's been working on for the last 10 years. This is the 2 bits of soil within that trial. The left, conventional system, flooded forever, burnt. The wheat straw is not burnt, but it is removed. It's removed for animal feed. So compared to the one on the right, now after 4 years, so this has been going for 10 years, after 4 years it sort of plateaued out, so all the goodness was done in 4 years. Obviously, soil physical and amelient properties, increased water holding capacities, increased nutrient holding capacity and everything else. But the guts of it was an increase of system yield of 40% and a decrease due to the mulch effect and the water holding capacity effect of water use by 40%. So if we can apply that sort of system to us, half our rice is sown in a conventional system of flying seed in and it basically flooded from word go. The highest evaporative demand obviously occurs during that period. So half our crop is also sown like this. So it's drill sown, conventionally flushed, comes up, gets to about 5 leaf and then filled up. Great weed control, cheap way to do it, or cheaper way to do it, certainly a more water effective way to do it. We are the only country in the world that also practices a system called delayed permanent water, where we flush right through the vegetative phase. So we've essentially eliminated 90% of the evaporation through the vegetative phase, which is around a 30% sort of increase in water use efficiency. But our soils are pretty tough. Like a lot of India, our soils are less than 1% organic matter. We don't have much mulch, we don't have a lot of water holding capacity, even though we have very good heavy clay. So to apply that system over the top of our already fantastic system changes the ballpark and gives us the real step change that we're capable of. In addition to that, multinational food companies like Kellogg's, Nestle, Mars, they want to know where their product comes from. They want a story behind it that knows it's ethically sourced, that it's good for it's ethically sourced, environmentally sound, and everything else. We've already got a fantastic story to tell. Dr. Wynne Ellis, who's the coordinator for the Sustainable Rice Platform for the United Nations Environmental Platform Program, I was fortunate enough to tour the Australian rice industry with him for a few days, showing him around, and he said at the end of that, and I'll quote him, "It is unbelievable what you lot are achieving in sustainable rice production." He said, "If you were Americans, you would be shouting this out at the rooftops." He said, "It's very, very admirable how humble you are in your achievements, but at some stage you really have to start shouting this from the rooftops." So people want to know where their food comes from. They want to know, we've heard this lots throughout this program, they want to trust in its source and they want their data to back it up. As I say, we have a fantastic story to tell, and telling it in a really good way is our opportunity, I guess. Leave you with these 3 recommendations. Just a few, but very pertinent and not little recommendations. Certainly more research and more focused research into in situ stubble management. There's some really good stuff going on where you remove the stubble from the field, but it's not big enough market and it never will be. Ensure research focus on perfecting our delayed permanent water system. The step change will come from partial flood. We need that flood for quality and for yield, and if we don't flood, we actually decrease water use efficiency. So, but to minimise that flood period from 140 days to 70 days is a huge difference, particularly if we then couple that with some of the soil capacity building techniques that has seen in India. And to tell our story, this has been a common thread right throughout. We have a fantastic story to tell. Imagine if that story was not just about a productive and profitable rice system that helps rejuvenate and build our soil capacity and preserve or be more efficient with our water reserves, but it's also our play in where we can help feed the world towards the future. Thank you.